A very good morning, students. We'll start our lecture 6 of Fundamentals of Agronomy course with today's topic of lecture 6, factor affecting crop growth and development. So the factor affecting crop growth and development has been classified into the two factors, the internal factors and the external factors. The internal factors are genetics or heredity which influence the crop growth and development, and the external factors are mainly the environmental factors that influences the crop growth and development. So mainly the crop growth is affected by the external factors, that is environmental factors such as climate, adaptive factor, biotic factor, physiographic factor and socio-economic factor. We will go through each factor individually and we will discuss. Starting with the first factor, the internal factor, the genetic factor. Which are these factors? The increase in crop yield and other desirable characters is related to the genetic makeup of a plant. So the internal factor is the genetic factor that determines the plant yield ability. So important for a breeder and a biotechnologist have incorporated many desirable characters and developed the high yielding varieties and hybrids. As you all know that before Green Revolution, the varieties which were grown in India were poor yielder, but the development of high-yielding varieties such as Sonalika, Sonara 64, Lerm-Rosa, and it was introduced to India. Because of that, there has been a drastic increase in food production, and we have now turned as a food surplus country. So, what are the important characters of a genetically important breed? The first is it is a high yielding ability, early maturing, resistant to the lodging, so that is strengthened to the start, tolerance to the drought, flood and salinity, and tolerance to the insect pest and diseases. The next is chemical composition of the grain, that is higher percentage of oil in oil seeds, protein in case of pulses. The next, quality of the grain, that is fineness, coarseness of the quality, then quality to the straw, that is for the fodder purpose, it is sweetness, juiciness. In this way, one of the major objective for a growth is internal factor, which is dependent on the genetics of a plant, and the breeder will always focus on developing such a genetics so it is highly beneficial for the humankind and even and development of the animals. So these all qualities increases the yield of the crop, which in turn increases the rate, increases the standard of living of a farmer. So next is external factor. In that external factor, the first is environmental factor or the climatic factor. The climatic factor which include the first is precipitation, that is rainfall. The good amount of rainfall decides the good growth of a crop. The next is temperature. We call it as cardial temperature or optimum temperature required for the crop growth. The next is humidity, the amount of moisture that is present in the area. The next is solar radiation. The next is wind velocity and atmospheric gases such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen, oxygen, water vapor. So these all climatic factors determines the growth of a crop. These all factors determines the growth of the plant. The first is precipitation. What is precipitation? Any form, all the kind of water that falls on the earth forms the atmosphere, such as rainfall, snow, hail, dew or fog. We call it as precipitation. It is a source of water for the crop production, and rainfall is most important factor that influences the vegetation on a place. So the total amount of rainfall and its seasonal distribution greatly affects the choice of the crop and the growth of the crop. See, we call Indian agriculture is a gambling because the monsoon is unpredictable. We get highly scattered rainfall which really affects the crop production. So the heavy and evenly distributed rainfall areas, crop like rice in plains, and hilly areas we can go with coffee, tea, rubber, and at the low rainfall area we can go with the drought resistant crops such as bajra, sorghum. The next is depending upon the water need. So if you see the precipitation, depending upon the precipitation and water need, we have classified the plant into three types, that is xerophyte, mesophyte and the hydrophytes. What are xerophytes? Xerophytes are the plants that grow or survive under very low moisture condition and withstand drought for a prolonged period. For an example, agave that can stand under very low moisture, survive under very low moisture condition, such crop we call it as xerophyte. Mesophyte, they require normal supply. Most of the plants are mesophyte. Normal supply of moisture for their growth and grow well under the soil with a moist condition. A good example is our field crops. Then hydro plants or hydrophytes are water loving plant, grow well under the good supply of water. We call it as hydrophyte. A good example, rice, aquatic plant. Based on the water needs, plants has been classified into xerophyte, hydrophytes and mesophytes. Xerophyte, mesophytes and hydrophytes. The second factor, that is temperature. Temperature is a measure of intensity of heat energy. It is a measure of intensity of heat energy or the degree of hotness or coolness. Temperature range from maximum growth of agriculture crops lies between 15 to 30 degrees centigrade. Every plant community has its own minimum and optimum and maximum temperature